Welcome back to Washington Journal. We're joined now by Larry Sabato. He is Center for Politics Director at the University of Virginia and also author of the book called Campaign of Chaos, Trump, Biden, Harris, and the 2024 American Election. Larry, welcome back to the program.
Mimi, thank you so much. Great to be back.
Before we talk about your book, I want to ask you about what's happening in Texas and how we got to this point. The Republican governor has accused Democratic lawmakers of possibly committing felonies.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm going to leave that to the lawyers in and out of Texas. But it's very simple how we got here. We got here because the House of Representatives is very closely divided. There's a critical election in 2026, the regular midterm elections, which will determine whether Democrats or Republicans control the House of Representatives for the final 2 years of President Trump's term. Now, naturally, he wants to see Republicans control the House of Representatives because they're likely, not certain, but likely to retain control of the Senate. He wants to have the whole Congress as he does now. He's able to command his people in the House and Senate to do pretty much what he wants. In order to do that, he has to find some extra seats because traditionally, and I think it probably will hold next year, that the out-of-power party will gain seats in the House of Representatives. Well, 5 seats in a closely divided House, which it is now, and might well be after the next election, is a lot of seats. And the president said, President Trump, that is, said, I want those additional 5 seats. We control the governorship. We control both houses of the Texas legislature. And they've got 5 Democratic seats that we could carve up and turn into Republican seats. And so Governor Abbott, Republican governor of Texas, said, good idea. Or maybe he thought it was a bad idea, but when the president calls you and says, do this, and you're in the president's party, and particularly with President Trump, you pretty much do what he says. And that's what's happened. The Democrats have almost no power here except the power to deny a quorum. And even that, in some ways, is limited. We'll see how long this actually lasts. So I know that was a long answer, but it's also a short explanation of why things are happening as they're happening.
Now, both parties have redrawn congressional districts for their advantage. How unique is the situation in Texas?
It's not unique, that's for sure. It's also not common because usually, in the old days when I was growing up, this was shortly after Thomas Jefferson died, you only had redistricting once a decade after the census. And it was messy then, and people got mad, and some people were districted out of their seats, and it was never happy. But you only had it once a decade. So you got through it, people got over their injuries and their hurt feelings, and we went on. Now, because partisanship is so intense, and we are so terribly divided in this country, people are looking for every advantage. And that includes the power to redistrict in states that permit it to be done more than once a decade. That doesn't mean you have to do it more than once a decade, but if you have the ability to do it and you see a way to gain some extra seats, well, you might throw fair play out the window. Or you might redefine fair play so that it includes population shifts that have occurred since the census. Take your pick. That's essentially what is happening here. It is as I said, it is not unique, but it is uncommon. But I'm afraid, I really am afraid, that this is going to become the new norm. And what's to stop states that have control, where one party has control of the governorship and both houses of the legislature, from redistricting and redistricting and redistricting every time they have the opportunity and they see a way to carve out a member of the opposition party? Fair play is important, Mimi. It really is. Fair play is a fundamental in American democracy and the American republic.
When you say you're afraid that this becomes a new norm, what are you really afraid of? What could happen?
Well, as you get older, you're afraid of everything. But the reason I'm afraid of this is because we already have partisan feelings at fever pitch. And this whole process causes hard feelings. It makes it more difficult for people to proceed legislatively in a bipartisan fashion, which occasionally is a good thing. Everything doesn't have to be partisan all the time. If you do this all the time, it simply means that people are going to be looking out for their partisan interests first. And if it serves the people, that's very secondary. It's almost a coincidence if it happens. We don't need any more intense partisanship. We need to cool our jets. That's what I'd like to see.
So your analysis indicates that as far as congressional districts go, only 19 out of 435 districts are actually competitive. How does that impact democracy, do you think?
I think it's terrible. I want to give full credit to my crystal ball team, Kyle Kondik and J. Miles Coleman, who do a great job in analyzing all these districts constantly. They do this day and night. It's really a sickness. But I would say this. Here's why it's bad. The fact that you don't have more competition in politics means that in most cases, congressmen and women are elected in the primary. It's like the old South. We used to call the Democratic primary tantamount to election because the general election didn't matter. Republicans weren't competitive in the South. Same was true in reverse in some of the northeastern states, Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine and so on. That is not a good thing because who are the people who participate in primaries? They tend to be much more conservative on the Republican side, much more liberal on the Democratic side. So these members of Congress become more rigid and ideological because they don't want to be defeated in the primary. They know they can win a general election because there's no competition. But they worry about the primary. It makes them more extreme, which means it's more difficult to get any kind of bipartisan compromise. And, we are all Americans, right? I mean, this is supposed to be one country. I thought that was settled back in the 1860s, but sometimes I wonder.
If you'd like to join our conversation, talk politics with Larry Sabato, you can do so. Call in now. Republicans are on 202-748-8001. Democrats are on 202-748-8000 and Independents 202-748-8002. Let's talk to callers. Here's Bill in Bryan, Ohio, Independent line. Good morning. You're on with Larry Sabato.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Sabato.
Good morning.
I don't know where to start, but just Republicans in general. I mean, you said something earlier about playing by the rules. Well, we know Donald Trump doesn't do that. Just his free drug prices, he says they're going to be free drugs or 1,000% off. If that's the case, then they're free. IVF, he's backing off that now. He promised that. He's the father of IVF. Kaczynski, why would you tell easily provable lies like that? I mean, his uncle did not teach. I'm sorry about that. Ted Kaczynski, his uncle died in 1985, and Kaczynski wasn't exposed until 1996. Why is he able to lie to these people so much? I just don't understand it. I'm lost.
Larry Sabato.
Look, it's a good question. There's a hat out there that I particularly like. I've seen it everywhere, and it simply says, make lying wrong again. And you could say it's a general societal problem. There's probably never been more lying in more sectors. But Donald Trump is an extreme example. He does tell so many untruths / lies, whatever you want to say, and gets away with it because, well, number one, his followers in MAGA have a filter of some sort that enables them to just slough it off and say, oh, well, that's just Trump. I happen to think presidential words matter. They really do. In history, they have anyway. And that if you're not careful about what you say and you don't try to be truthful, it's going to catch up with you eventually, though I'll admit it certainly hasn't caught up with Donald Trump, but it's not a good thing. I mean, do we want to teach young people that it's okay to lie and to lie a lot and to lie about important things, not just trivial things? I hope we all say no, but I wonder. So I agree with the gentleman about that.
On the Republican line in Westchester, Ohio, Deborah, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
as a side note, I'm a graduate of Randolph-Macon in 1973, and I spent quite a few weekends over at UVA.
I'll bet
in my
you did.
college life. I did.
It was
But anyway,
heavily male in those days. It had been all male, but they started to include women, but not very many, unfortunately.
Well, and I was at Randolph-Macon was a women's college, and it's now including men.
Yes.
So, but anyway, our first Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, 1790, did the census. It was 16 states and the Southwest Territories. Our challenge is that our census no longer reflects citizenship, so it's difficult to get pure, in terms of representation. I'm all for money being distributed by population, but representation in Congress should be citizenship, I think. I just finished reading a book about the 1787 Constitution, with that convention. And I wish everybody would read our real history. Maybe someday I'll get to visit the Miller Center. I'm not sure. I haven't been back to UVA or Virginia in years. But anyway, if you had 1.3 million people move into Texas, and unless you redistrict, you don't really. I'm not sure you really have representation.
All right, go ahead, Larry.
Well, first of all, I want to tell her I'm glad she wants to visit the Miller Center, but first on her list should be the Center for Politics. And there's no bias there on my part at all, but you come first to the Center for Politics. And if you have extra time, you can go to the Miller Center or other centers here at UVA, and I'm being facetious. Not really, actually. I think I mean that. But I'm delighted to hear from somebody from Randolph-Macon and about my era. We're about the same age. Look, if you have to do more than one redistricting in a decade, okay, and I see your point about population changing quickly in some states. In other states, it's stable. But if population is changing quickly, if you have to do it, then maybe you have two redistrictings, one every 5 years. I don't think I'd want to go through it personally, but if you feel strongly about that, then that's one way to do it. As far as excluding non-citizens from the census or having them listed as non-citizens and then excluding them from congressional representation, you need a constitutional amendment for that. And good luck. We are so divided, and I hate to say this because I don't support this attitude, but we are so divided, we could not get a constitutional amendment passed and ratified saluting motherhood. You know it. You know we couldn't. We get into arguments about who's a mother, and I mean a real mother, not the other kind. So that's where we are, and we're all going to have to work at it if we ever can get back to a point where we can have heated debates, sincere, principled debates, but then shake hands and go about our lives respecting the other person.
Larry, the NRCC chair, Richard Hudson, has discouraged GOP members from holding in-person town halls. I want to show you a portion of Mike Flood's town hall from yesterday and then get your opinion on whether you think that's a good strategy.
My question is fiscal. With $450 million FEMA dollars being reallocated to open Alligator Alcatraz and $600 million taxpayer FEMA dollars being used to now open more concentration camps and ICE burning through $8.4 million a day to illegally detain people, how much does it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
Americans went to the polls in November, and they had a choice between a Democratic candidate that had an open border, no enforcement, fentanyl, drugs, human trafficking. And they had a choice between that and a candidate that said, close the border, get illegal immigrants out of our country, stop the fentanyl, stop the human trafficking, stop the drugs, stop the crime, stop the violence, That's what Americans voted for. Americans voted for a border that is secure. And I support the president enforcing our immigration laws, which, by the way, were written by Congress.
And by the way, C-SPAN is covering Republican and Democratic town halls. You can see the schedule on our website, cspan.org, for upcoming town halls that we'll be covering. Larry, what do you make of that and the strategy of just not having in-person town halls?
Well, I admire and respect Congressman Flood for having a town hall. And that is part of representation. It really is. Now, you also have to take precautions in this violent era. Again, regrettably, I'm sure he had sufficient security there, but you need to do those sorts of things because we've all seen these terrible incidents unfold, and the number of threats against members of both parties constantly flowing in have reached record numbers in modern times, at least thousands of them in every year. This is absolutely unacceptable and must be condemned by everybody. So I do support the fact that he had in-person town halls, and I think they all should do it. It's part of representation. And I live in a district where the member, I'm not going to mention his name, I don't believe is at a town hall. He has online town halls because that's perfectly safe. They can filter who says what and who gets a chance to speak. And I'm sure it's more comfortable for the representative, but I don't know that there's any guarantee in the Constitution or laws that a representative should feel comfortable. That's not part of our system. So I'm glad that you're covering them. I think people should watch them. You need to remember that people who are angry about something are much more likely to show up at town halls. Now, having said that, people who are angry are much more likely to show up at the polls. So if this is still going on in the fall of 2026, it may tell us something about what's going to happen once the votes are tallied in November.
So what do you think about the midterm elections, or is it too early to tell? I mean, what are the big issues at play here?
It's way too, I see people, it's going to go this way. They're going to pick up 40 seats. The Republicans are going to keep control by 12. It is absolutely impossible to know what is going to happen all those months ahead when the votes are tallied. And we start voting at the end of September in some states, but the votes are tallied in early November 2026. Look how much happens in a day. Imagine how much can happen between now and then. So you do have history to rely on. The incumbent White House party tends to lose seats in the House, but it doesn't have to happen. It didn't happen in 1998 under Clinton. Democrats gained seats. It didn't happen in 2002 under George W. Bush. The Republicans gained seats in the House. So there are always exceptions. You can't be certain of anything in politics. You can predict things, only if you have a crystal ball, though, of course. But you can predict things, and that's fun. It's part of the fun of politics, and I think it gets people involved.
On the line for Democrats in New Jersey, here is Mitchell. Good morning.
Good morning, Mimi. Good morning, Professor Sabato.
Good morning.
Here's my, I'm in my late 60s. I've been following politics fairly closely most of my life. I think what's happened, what I'm seeing now in the Trump era, and it started before that, but just how weak our system is, how weak our guardrails are in protecting our system, and how much our system was always dependent upon the good faith of our representatives and doing what's right for the people. Now it's just seems to be a power play. Having said that, a lot of the responses that the Democrats might take are legal when they retain power back, are legal, but I don't know if they're necessarily advisable, like increasing the size of the Supreme Court, adding Washington, D.C. as a state and Puerto Rico as a state. And when we talk about the redistricting, one of the other legal methods that could be done is increasing the representation size of the House. I mean, most of the House members, I believe, are serving close to 750,000 people. Not that long ago, it was more like 500,000. So there's a numbers argument for that too. But one thing it might do if they add more representatives is dilute the effect of the gerrymandering, and I'd like your opinion on that.
Certainly. By the way, I have another book. It's the one you want to buy now is Campaign of Chaos about the 2024 election. Mimi, I know you agree with my mentioning it, but I did a book in the first decade of this century called A More Perfect Constitution, in which I proposed 23 changes to the Constitution, more as a way of starting debate and discussion, especially in the classroom, about this. And I included some of the ideas like expanding the House that you have just mentioned. So I agree with some of these ideas, though, people should debate them and think about them, because it's always a good idea to think about the Constitution. But look, you said something very important right in the beginning. We don't just depend upon what's in the Constitution or what's in the rule book created by statutes passed by Congress and the state legislatures. As a country, we have depended heavily on tradition, respect for custom and tradition. And that is what is gone or going. You can argue about whether it's totally gone or whether it's going, but there is a disrespect for the ground rules of fair play. And it is hurting us badly. And people need to look at that and think about it. Politicians are always going to do what maintains or increases their power. It's only the check provided by the electorate that may make them pay attention to custom and tradition. You see this in Congress all the time. Look at how things have deteriorated in some of the state legislatures as well, and the presidency.
Susan in Massachusetts on the line for Independence. Good morning.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Sabato.
Morning.
I live in a 100% gerrymandered state, and the downside of that is rampant corruption. Candidates that run unopposed, literally with no opposition candidate from their own party, much less an opposite party or an independent candidate. All branches of government are in cahoots with each other. Policies are terrible. Mismanagement is rampant. Recently, the voters, by ballot initiative, voted for a state audit because to call the state legislature a den of thieves would be an understatement. And so we voted for this audit, and yet the governor, the attorney general, and certainly the legislature won't honor the voters' wishes. And so earlier you made a comment about, after every census, we redo districts and then we move on and everybody's at a happy place. Well, you're not at a happy place if you have no access to vote. If all primaries are party based only, and what do you do if there isn't an opposite party in your state? So I could go on and on. For instance, our legislature a few years ago voted themselves annual auto raises of 12% annually without any permission from the voters. So it just
okay, Susan, let's get to a response.
Yeah, I don't know if she announced what state she was from. I think I'm
Massachusetts.
happy. Oh, Massachusetts. Okay. Well, then there is a state. I'm going to avoid talking about one particular state. But I'll tell you, Massachusetts is a heavily Democratic state. I grew up in the one-party South. And it was also Democratic, but totally different than today's Democratic Party. And the Republicans were the party of reform and insurgency and so on. But I'll tell you what I learned, because the Democrats, a very conservative, I hate to say it, segregationist Democratic Party, won all the elections. And I learned early on by watching it carefully that two things result from one party control, one party dominance. The first thing is arrogance, and the second thing is corruption. Corruption. So arrogance and corruption. I don't care which party is the dominant party. That's another reason why competition is a good thing. Now, what you said, what can I do? Well, you have to persuade your fellow citizens. You have to take the advantages given to you by the First Amendment and by the media today, which includes social media, not just traditional media. And traditional media is much more diverse than it used to be. You use those opportunities, just like you've done. You've called C-SPAN, you've talked to, I don't know how many other Americans across the country, but you have made a case for something you think needs to be done. That's what we all have to do in discussion with others, because other people have very valid points that may make you rethink some of your assertions or my assertions.
On the Republican line in Dewey, Arizona, Steve, good morning.
Good morning. I heard just a while ago about how you put down Trump as a liar and a lot of MAGA is bad and all that. And it prompted me to call. And the lies that really bother me is that the border was secure and that Biden was sharp as a tack and the Russian collusion and all that. Those are real lies. Those are really big lies. And the woman from Nebraska who was complaining about concentration camps, when Obama was president, he was considered the deporter chief. And if you look at the photos, the people he deported were not the bad crime element people. They were just people who broke the law. And the photos show them on blankets and in cages. And where was the Democrat Party when all that was going on? You know, and he didn't have to deal with the 20 million Biden let into the country. So the real lies that are turning the country negatively are the lies that the Democrats have been telling us ever since Trump's been in office.
All right. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, I would put it this way. Lying is endemic to politics, and it happens on both sides. Yes, if that's what you want me to say, of course it does. But there are degrees of lying, and there are numerical totals of lying. And not just focusing on Trump, but you were the one who brought him up. He told in his first term a record number of lies in 4 years. I mean, it numbered over, I believe, well, tens of thousands. I don't remember the exact number, but people who keep track of lies. And some of them are pure lies. Some of them are about small things, but some of them are about large things, like he's just done with the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. Just absurd what he has asserted. You can say the numbers maybe aren't as accurate as they should be, and what can we do to strengthen the process instead of maybe cutting the workforce there. Or you can say what he has said, which is it's all a partisan plot against me to make me look bad. No. That's a big lie, and it's going to have major consequences for whether we, the people, and people around the world in the business community trust the statistics being released by the government. I know I'm going to question everything that comes out of the Trump government about statistics that were once considered a nonpartisan section of government, because if you give the president bad news, you're likely to get your head cut off. That is, you'll be fired. The messenger will be killed. So there are big lies and there are small lies, and I guess it's wrong to equate all of them. I don't want to do that, but I'm sorry, there's never been a president who has told so many lies, and I think it's way too late to correct any of that at this point.
Here's Roseanne in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin, Democrat. Good morning, Roseanne.
Yes, thank you for this exchange, Mr. Sabato. I don't know what, but I agree with you 100% when you say President Biden should not have ran for the second term because promises made should be promises kept. He said he would be a one-term president, and like you had said, that debate was just, oh my gosh, right? But the problem is with egos. Egos, when you get into these positions where you think I'm right and everybody else is absolutely wrong, and I love all this power. And you can also go into Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She should have gotten out of there. She was very, very sick. Now, throughout history, is that going to be good for what she had espoused to be for in the beginning, and then in the end, when she obviously should have gotten out, she didn't, and then we had this thing happen with President Obama, and so her legacy cannot be considered as being really, really good. And even with Joe Biden, the ego is there. The ego is involved. He should have gotten out. And Kamala Harris, the amount of time that she had to try to put anything together was just insane. And do you think, Mr. Sabato, that there should be an age limit as to what the president should be able to run for, like 65, 70 years old? Because as you know, and I, that when we start to age, we start to lose our stuff. Thank you for taking my call.
Very good question. It's like she knows me. Yes, age does take a toll, no question about that. And we all don't recognize it as fully as probably we should. And that was certainly true of Joe Biden and his immediate circle of aides and family. But look, I don't favor statutory and certainly not constitutional age limits, in part because life expectancy changes. We hope it always increases, and maybe it won't. But if 100 years from now, life expectancy is considerably longer than it is now, and we're stuck, we're shackled to age limits that were put in the Constitution today, that would be a bad thing. I personally think we would be better off electing more presidents in their late 40s, in their 50s, and in their early 60s, because they're much more likely to be vigorous and healthy and strong and able to put up with the terrible stresses of the presidency, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or liberals or conservatives. I would favor that. But, in the end, you can't save people from themselves. You just can't do it. If the electorate, if the citizenry of a country doesn't exercise good judgment and good sense, then frankly, sooner or later, a country is finished. And so we may rely too heavily on constitutional guardrails or statutory guardrails. And I also believe that for Congress. If people want to keep reelecting people in their 80s and 90s, that's their choice. I know seniority matters a lot, but
so
frankly,
Larry, we got a question for you from Paul in Cleveland, Ohio, on text. What is Mr. Sabato's opinion on the DOJ asking the states for their voter registration information? And just by way of background on that, Larry, this is the AP. Justice Department seeks voter and election information from at least 19 states. It says, for instance, in Colorado, the department demanded all records relating to the 2024 election and any records the state retained from the 2020 election. Do you know anything about that?
I read that article, and I've heard from other people about the demands from the federal government. Look, if there is legitimate suspicion of fraudulent activity or sloppy record keeping, that's one thing. Then you may need federal intervention, although I think the state itself or the courts in a state would be a better place to pursue those questions. If there is an ulterior motive here, though, to go through the data and to, frankly, invent fraud that doesn't exist, or to find tiny examples of someone who was misregistered, shouldn't have been registered, and somehow blow that up into a condemnation of the entire system, I'm concerned about that. We already have a crisis of confidence in the country about our election system that I don't think is justified in the vast majority of cases. We have a very honest, well-run system, and it's a tragedy that certain candidates and office holders have stoked the fires of cynicism rather than supporting the system that we all have built over the years. It's so much better than when I started following politics in the 60s.